The race for the White House kicks off in Iowa today as Republicans in that state will be the first Americans to vote for a presidential nominee.
You can't sit home. If you're sick as a dog, you say, darling, I gotta make it. Even if you vote and then pass away, it's worth it.
All right. Polling suggests former U.S. President Donald Trump is the clear frontrunner, but a recent survey by the Angus Reid Institute found Canadians polled believe a second Biden term would be better for Canada-U.S. relations by a wide margin of 64% to just 15% for Trump. So what should Canadians be watching for as this race gets underway? The Power Panel is back on that. Rob Russo, Vandana Cotter, Brad Levine, and Gary Keller. Gary, I don't know if you've ever said, come out and vote for me. Even if you die, it'll be worth it, any of the campaigns you worked on. But you know, the Des Moines Register has Trump at 48% among Iowa Republicans this weekend. What do you make of his lead? Is it absolutely insurmountable in the GOP right now?
Well, it's certainly insurmountable. It appears to be in the Iowa caucus, which is an interesting and fascinating way to have a primary. So yes, he is certainly way ahead in that caucus, and it'll be very interesting to see also how turnout happens today, given the weather. You think the weather is cold in Alberta? It's just as equally as cold, and the roads are terrible in Iowa as well. So if turnout is a little bit worse, and they're motivated, Haley or DeSantis voters, maybe it isn't as high as 48%. But I think, today is the kickoff to the larger next few weeks and few months, where we have the variety of primaries. It's all going to be decided the GOP by March 5th at the latest, when we have Super Tuesday. But this leads in then to the next real first primary, New Hampshire. And again, can Nikki Haley seem to eat into that lead that Trump has, because as we all know in the American system, if you're not scoring points on the board, the dollars don't follow you and you've got to pull out. So yeah, this is very interesting to see it kick off.
Yeah, the great political philosopher Ricky Bobby once said, if you're not first, you're last. And that's kind of the way it is with the Republicans, right? And it seems like Iowa, though, will be a race for second place. And if it's Nikki Haley, can the anything but Trump forces consolidate around her? That seems to be the only hope of the Republicans who don't want Donald Trump back.
Yeah, Iowa's very strange. We have to remember that this is not kind of a one person, one vote kind of thing. It's as close as they get in the United States to the kind of delegated conventions we used to have here in Canada. People that's why they're called caucuses. Look, one of the things that I'm going to be looking for as the election season begins in the United States is that it always coincided, when I was down there, with the high season for protectionism and Canada getting whipsawed in that. Both sides of the aisle now, with Trump as the guy who's one or two indictments short of the nomination, both sides of the aisle now are protectionist. And we inevitably get caught up in that. So I'm looking to see how Canada is going to be played in this election, and we've got to be ready for the fact that there will be protectionist measures bandied about in the campaign, and we've got to be prepared to respond here in Canada.
Well, Vandana, you were in the Prime Minister's office during the first wave of this, right? When NAFTA was sort of, fine, exactly, was on the table. Look, we saw a bit of that with Biden. Rob's right on that, but he's been able to be talked into this more reasonable continental protectionism as they do this North American friendshoring thing. With Trump, you just don't know, right? So I mean, how do you think the Prime Minister and the Liberals are getting ready for a possible sequel here?
I think, they've done it before. This is the good thing about, very few things of a good thing about if Trump wins here, but, this is a playbook they've used before, right? This actually would be good for the government, because this will remind people of some of the successes the government has had in negotiating NAFTA. And then people constantly, they underestimate the Prime Minister, and they weren't sure that if they can fight back for Canada, and they did. They were able to fight a good deal. They were able to defend Canada's interests and prove that they won't be bullied around. So I think, if anything, this is the playbook they've worked before. I think they already know how to handle it. And we've been in some of those rooms, so I think it'll be something that they'll keep an eye on, but they'll know what's coming towards them.
Brad, I don't know if the Liberals are banking on a Trump victory or simply just a Trump resurgence to help them here on this side of the border, right, with this MAGA-style Republican attacks they're launching on the Conservatives. You look at the data from Angus Reid, only 22% of Canadians think that Trump would be better for the U.S., a much larger margin think it would be worse. Do you think this is the sentiment that the Liberals are trying to tap into as the Trump season revs into high gear?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one, because while you can maybe make some gains by calling Poilievre Trump light or Trump like, if Trump does win, then Canadians are going to ask themselves who would they rather see go up against Trump as Prime Minister. And I don't know if that's a clear answer. Certainly, Trump is unpopular in Canada for sure, but you want somebody to stand up, and I think that there might be room for Poilievre to make a credible case. At least the Conservatives, I think, would make the compelling case. I think tonight it is about second place. It's interesting when we see those that support DeSantis currently in third place in Iowa, how many of them, it's not inherently an anti-Trump vote, but more of a pro-DeSantis vote. If DeSantis doesn't make it, all the way, how many of DeSantis supporters, might then swing to Trump? Unknown. So, I see if Haley can come, if he's got half the support tonight Trump does, if Haley can, just get into the mid-20s, low 20s, and get to New Hampshire, I think we could see a more interesting race here. The thing with Trump going forward on the politics and what it means for Canada, I pick up the point that it's unpredictability.
Yeah.
And the notion that we just don't know what we're going to get. What will that mean for our federal election come after the presidential? We'll have to see how that all plays out. But the notion of protection, I mean, listen, Canada is with the EV strategy, with the critical mineral strategy for the battery, and the continental manufacturing under Biden, Canada hasn't fared too poorly. It'd be interesting to see if Trump tries to undo that, to see if some of that investment comes to Canada that might be slated for the U.S. under Biden.
Yeah, Gary, the benefit of transitioning to Biden is that he's a conventional U.S. politician. The problem with Biden is that he's a conventional U.S. politician. You still have to deal with all of these sort of, American political impulses. But on the question of a Trump resurgence, right, now that it's into that official season, how do you think that inserts itself into the political debate in Canada? Going back to the point that the Liberals keep trying to use this to attack your party.
Well, look, I mean, there's no doubt about the fact for the last few weeks and months, the Liberals have been running, between 10 and 17 points behind Pierre Poilievre. And when those numbers start to get baked in for as long as they have, you start looking as a government for external events to try to change the channel, change the mode. So I think the Liberals desperately want Donald Trump not just to be the nominee, but to win the next election so that they can try to turn that sentiment as an election slogan. They've tried desperately already to do it. Hasn't worked so great. I think of the Mark Gerritsen and the other the chief government House leaders press conference before Christmas. They tried to do that, and the press guy said, "What are you guys doing here? Like, this is ridiculous." So, but I do think they do want to have that debate and try to tie Mr. Poilievre as much as possible. I don't think it's going to work. And I do think, as Brad was saying, there may be an argument to say, Mr. Poilievre will be possibly a tougher competitor against a Trump administration. But I think they really do want that. And I don't think that's good for Canada. I think that's bad for Canada, even as the Biden administration has demonstrated protectionist tendencies in the past and took a lot of energy to get out of Buy American to Buy North America.
Rob, is this the type of external event that could change the domestic political dynamic?
It could. I hope the Liberals don't hope that it's in their interest to see Donald Trump elected, because I think they, in their heart of hearts, know it's not in Canada's interest to see him elected again. I do think that if Poilievre has had any success in the last 6 months to a year, and he has, according to the polls, it's because he's moved away from those kinds of MAGA-like policies or extremist policies. He talks less about gatekeepers now and more about the affordability crisis, the problems with housing, the problems with interest rates. And I think that's where his success lies. I do think, and in fact, I know that the Liberals are doing diligent research to find out if members of his caucus have made MAGA-like statements in the past, and you can bet that they have, and that there might be evidence of it, and they're holding that back, and they're prepared to play that card. But to say that they'd be happy to see Trump elected, I really hope that that's not the case.
Vanden, I'm going to go to the Liberal cabinet retreat next week to cover that. Should we expect the Prime Minister to endorse Trump for the nomination? I mean, how do you think they're viewing it internally, right? Like, I mean, you're trying to take advantage of anything you can in politics, but they certainly wouldn't see this as a good thing, would they necessarily?
No, I would say, and also knowing the people there, knowing the Prime Minister, they wouldn't actually depend on an external event to make. They're going to focus on governing, and they're going to focus on hitting on the issues that Canadians care about, which is affordability, which is housing. You see the PM, you see how Fraser today, they're just going again and again and again, focusing on those issues. This, yeah, sure, will be a bump for them, sure, but does the PM really want to work with Donald Trump? Like, probably not.
Mm-hmm. No. Well, on the point that Brad and Gary kind of made, how could Poilievre turn this around? The way he's being criticized for this MAGA-style approach, how could he turn around? They think the comparison to Trump hurts him. How could he make the argument that he's actually the right guy to deal with Trump?
I mean, you talk about how he's a fighter in general. He's fighting for Canadians. Like, that kind of language seems to work for him. Like, I'm fighting for you. It's always like, let's bring it home. Like, that type of language helps. He can say, I'll fight that for you. I'm going to bring it home with Donald Trump as well. Like, he can just, the way he's poising himself as a fighter for the little guy, as a fighter for someone who maybe seemed like they're not covered in this government or thought about in this government, he'll probably use that same language to say that I am the person who can deal with Donald Trump.
I think experience has shown that if there is a good relationship at the executive level, you can get a lot done if you're the Prime Minister of Canada. And so if he can say, look, he and I are not enemies, we have some points of commonality, I can actually advocate effectively for Canada because he's not, and he doesn't have the antipathy towards me that he might have, or we know he has for Justin Trudeau. It's on the public record.
But two strong personalities like that doesn't necessarily mean you get along. You can clash even bigger than that, right? Like, Donald Trump likes to be a star. He wants to be the main person in the show. Like, he may not like sharing space with someone who's just like him. He actually might like having the comparison to Justin Trudeau instead, right? So just because they're similar in thought and in personality, and maybe like Donald Trump doesn't see that. He might be like, I'm actually better than you. I don't think like I like you at all. So I don't actually think that means that they're going to get along.
This is why we have to keep Gary and Brad separate. But no, Gary, just on that point, is it as simple, just as a final point, as Poilievre saying, I have some common ground with him and I can work with him, or is it the I can stand up to Donald Trump? How do you think he can twist the Liberal attack around, as you and Brad have suggested, as possible here?
I think it's stand up for Canada, stand up for Canadian interests, Canadian values on the world stage. I'll work with him to defend Canadian interests when I have to, but I'll stand up as loudly and strongly against them if he is working against Canadian interests. I think that's almost how Justin Trudeau treated the first Trump administration. I'll work with him when I have to, and I'll not do it. I'll stand up for Canadian interests when I don't have to. And I think that's just the reality of having to deal with this.
We're all going to look some silly when Nikki Haley gets 80% of the vote tonight, aren't we? We got to leave it there. I want to thank the Power Panel. We're out of time. Gary Keller, Brad Levine, Vanden O'Connor, and Rob Rousseau. Happy Monday, gang. Thanks for being here. See you.
Thank you.
With you.